RimWorld can be a cruel place, and so the small things like having light, being a nice temperature, and not hating your existence are all made easier with some lovely electricity. Most scenarios start with electricity, but if yours doesn't, your colonists need to do a bit of thinking at a research bench, and they'll soon figure it out. The electricity research unlocks several power-producing buildings, as well as power conduits. You need to build power conduits like wires around your base. An electricity-consuming building, like a light, must be within 7 tiles of a power conduit for it to connect to your power grid and work. Of course, this will only work if you have enough power in your grid. If it cannot connect, or if you do not have enough power production or power stored in your batteries, it will show this symbol. A good plan is to construct one line of conduits, with perpendicular lines spaced every 14 tiles, which will allow anything within that area to connect to your power grid. There are 3 options for conduits: the normal power conduit, the hidden power conduit, and the waterproof conduit. Waterproof conduits can cross shallow water like ponds and shallow rivers. Hidden conduits cost 2 steel instead of 1, but they cannot suffer from the short-circuiting events, which drain all your batteries of power in a small explosion. To not have to deal with that event, it's always worth using hidden conduits instead of the cheaper normal conduit. They're also not visible, making your base much nicer to look at. Win-win. Let me introduce you to the Wood-Powered Generator. This is built using 100 steel and 2 components, and it burns 75 wood to output 1000 watts of power for 3.4 days. This is an easy and reliable way to produce power when you start, as long as your map has plenty of trees. If you have someone with a good plant skill, you can easily harvest a lot of wood quickly. If you create a large plant zone and turn off plant crops, your colonists will only harvest the trees that have the ready to harvest status within that zone. You can then hide the zone, and that's just a visual change. It doesn't actually hide the zone from your colonists, but it means you don't need to look at a big green box out on the map. Wind turbines also cost 100 steel and 2 components and generate power from the wind. This varies depending on the weather type, and when the weather changes, it transitions to a different power output. When it's windy, it tops out at producing 3,450 watts of power, equivalent to over 3 wood-powered generators. However, because the wind is not constant, it's best to be used with batteries, which help level out the whole power grid. The turbine itself takes up this 7x2 space, but it's got an area in front and an area behind the turbine which need to be kept clear. Trees, walls, mountains, roofs, they all block the turbine if they're within that space. Each tile of one of these blocking items reduces the turbine's efficiency by 20%, and so 5 of these items stop the turbine producing any power at all. There are some good uses for this space. If it is soil, you can grow crops in the area, helping it keep clear of trees. You could also floor it using a cheap material like concrete, or build the turbine so it's pointing out over some empty space like a pond. Some low-lying buildings, including solar panels and shelves, do not block the turbine. Be aware that weather controller quests that cause a permanent or timed weather condition can harm or help your wind turbine's power generation. Batteries make everything relating to power easier. Each battery is made from 70 steel and 2 components. Make sure your batteries are covered by a roof, because rain falling on them is another cause for them to explode. To charge the battery, you need to have an excess of power generation. The battery will then convert that excess into stored power, but only at 50% efficiency. So here we have one wood-powered generator producing 1000 watts. We then have a few rooms and some conduits connecting it all. There is one electric stove, which uses 350 watts to run, and then 2 wall lights and 3 standard lamps, which each use 30 watts of power. So, in total, they consume 500 watts of power between them. We have one battery, which is empty. It's 5 AM, and we're going to run this for 24 hours. As you can see, by the time we get to 5 AM the next morning, we hit 250 watt days stored within the battery due to the excess of 500 watts for the whole period and the 50% efficiency. 30 watt days could power a 30 watt item, like one of the lights, for 1 day. I've used the development mode now to empty the wood power generator of wood, and so it's no longer producing any power. We can now see that the grid has a deficit of 500 watts of power from the stoves and the lights. We can expect the battery to be able to power these items for half a day. And sure enough, around 12 hours later, at 5 PM, the battery runs out of power and the lights and stove turn off. It's useful to know how these batteries work, even though you probably won't pay that much attention to this when you're playing. As you can imagine, batteries are really good when you have variable power sources, like wind turbines or solar panels, where your excess power is stored and then released when your power generation reduces overnight or when it's less windy. Keeping an eye on your batteries is a good way to check the health of your power grid. If the batteries are always full, you've got nothing to worry about. But if they're frequently dipping towards being empty, then you need to add more power generation or turn off some of the electricity consuming buildings by using the switch in each of the building's menus or setting up power switches to turn off entire sections of your base. You can actually also build a single hidden conduit that's not connected to the main grid, and you can then use the reconnect button to switch the wire connecting it to the grid from the main grid to the solo conduit instead. This turns off that power consuming building without your pawn's involvement. The next set of buildings all require some more research at the research table to unlock. Solar generators cost 100 steel and 3 components and produce 1,700 watts of power during daylight, going down to 0 watts overnight. The power generation slowly drops to 0 with dusk and then climbs back up again from dawn into the next day. Day length varies depending on the location of the planet, which makes it a little difficult to pin down exactly how much power your solar generators will produce. At the equator, you'll have roughly 9 hours of full sunlight, 7 hours of reduced sunlight, and 8 hours of no sunlight each day. Weather conditions do not impact solar panels' power generation. Why fog impact wind turbines but not solar panels is one of the mysteries of the RimWorld universe. The Chemfuel Generator is also unlocked by the electricity research, but you don't have a way of producing chemfuel until you've researched biofuel refining. The Chemfuel Generator is 100 steel and 3 components, and it turns 30 chemfuel into 1,000 watts of power for 6.7 days. To make chemfuel, you put 70 organic materials such as wood, vegetables, or meat into the biofuel refinery, and that then produces 35 chemfuel. This makes it considerably more efficient than the wood-powered generator. The Watermill Generator requires some flowing water, like a river or stream, on your map. There's no point unlocking it if you don't have one of those. For 80 steel, 280 wood, and 3 components, each watermill will produce 1,100 watts of power. You do need to space out your watermills so the turbulence of each water wheel doesn't disrupt the next one. With heavy bridges recently being added to the game, it's now possible to protect your watermills with more than just wooden walls on light bridges, so you can actually surround it by stone now. The Hydrothermal Generator has a hefty 3,200 research to unlock. They can only be constructed on steam geysers that you might find around your map, and so you're limited to the number you can build. They each require 340 steel and 8 components to construct. However, after all that effort and materials, you do get a nice reward, with each hydrothermal generator providing a constant 3,600 watts of power. The unstable power cell is used by mechanoids to power the mortars they use to rain shells down onto your base, and the turrets they use to shoot at trading travellers that are stupid enough to walk right past them. If you can clear the turrets and mortars using smoke and patience, without destroying the unstable power cells, then you can deconstruct them and reconstruct them within your base for a prize of 400 watts of sweet power. It's best to put these in a safe area in your base and then wall them in, because they do cause quite a big explosion when shot. The Vanometric power cell can be provided as a reward for completing quests, and it produces 1,000 watts of constant power when installed. Both these power types are not something you'll end up with that many of, but they're still really useful when you get them. Constant free power is always useful. When you build a ship engine for the normal vanilla ending, it produces 1,000 watts of power, but this is just a little added bonus to the ship engine rather than a viable power strategy, so I'm not including it on any of the further lists. When pollution was added to the game with the Biotech DLC, we were also provided the Toxifier Generator. This building costs 125 steel, 3 components, and produces 1,400 watts of power. This building then pollutes a radius 27 circle at a rate of 2 tiles per day. Given there are over 2,000 tiles, it will take about 18 years to pollute this whole area, likely way longer than you will play one colony. With the Anomaly DLC, we have to get a little bit weird and gain 2 new sources of power. To unlock these, you need to have the Anomaly research tree unlocked, and then research several different anomaly researches by studying trapped entities. Once we've got access to the Electroharvester, it can extract power from trapped entities on holding platforms. The Electroharvester is made from 50 steel, 25 biofurrite, and 1 component. The power it outputs depends on the body size of the trapped entity, and extracting power both damages the entity over time and causes a -25 to the entity containment score. The Electroharvester has a range at which it can connect to platforms, and with some careful configuration it can connect to 8 platforms at once. However, the power produced caps out at 2000 watts total, meaning you can hit that 2000 cap with fewer, higher body size entities, and also help keep the entity containment score of your holding platforms high. This table shows the power output from each anomaly entity, as well as the number of those entities you'd need to hit a 2000 watt cap. The next anomaly generator is the Biofurrite Generator, made from 50 steel, 100 Biofurrite, 4 components and 1 anomaly shard. It turns 60 Biofurrite into 4000 power for 10 days, making it the most efficient resource consuming generator and one of the highest power outputs we've seen in any of the generators in the game. You can get the Biofurrite by manually extracting it from entities, or you can build a Biofurrite harvester which extracts it automatically. We can expand the table to show the amount of Biofurrite produced each day using a Biofurrite harvester, and therefore the number of each entities would need to power 1 Biofurrite generator. We've only got one more power generation method left, the only recently added Gravcore power cells as part of the Odyseey DLC. They are built from 60 steel, 50 Gravlite panels, 2 advanced components and a Gravcore. The Gravcores are hard to come by, found as loot on certain structures in low RimWorld orbit or in the depths of places like insect hives. They are needed for several other Gravcore built items, but when you do have one spare for a Gravcore power cell, it's the most power that can be produced by one single tile at 1200 watts. It does require being placed on your gravship substructure, so if you don't want to build it in your gravship, you need to deconstruct and rebuild your grav engine in your base, build a few tiles of substructure, put the Gravcore power cell on it, and then move the grav engine back to your gravship. With every power generation type described, let's summarise. I've added all our power generation methods to this table with their power output number and any requirements or consequences to using this generation method. I'm then going to add a few other columns to this table, with the first being research. This table shows the total research cost at normal research speed for each of the power generation methods, as well as every research project required for each method. I've assigned a rank based on how comparatively hard each one is. Given unstable and vanometric power cells cannot be researched, I'm going to change that column to be difficulty to obtain instead, and then update it accordingly and move this to our summary table. Then I want to rank these buildings by material cost. However, it felt a little unfair not adjusting this for power produced. The simplest way I could think to do this was to look at the cost of each power generation type if each one is aiming to produce 10,000 watts of power production. Therefore, I'll add a column showing how many of each power producer you would need to hit this threshold. These numbers are the closest full number that exceeds 10,000 produced watts. The variable power methods like wind turbines can be a little tricky, given at high wind it only takes 3 turbines to produce 10,000 watts of power, and so I've adjusted this quite harshly. You may have spotted I've separated out solar panels on planet from solar panels in space. This is because, despite orbiting around the planet, the solar panels on your gravship magically have 100% light reaching it from the sun 100% of the time. Apparently the planet never gets between it and the sun, even though it travels around to the dark side of the planet every day. Basically, solar panels are awesome in space, but I'm getting ahead of myself because my next video will be covering the best power methods for your gravship, so watch out for that. Now, let's go to the table showing all the resources required to build each of our power generation methods. This doesn't include the resources required for example, the infrastructure needed to produce Chemfuel, or for the buildings needed to contain anomaly entities. So don't use this as an exact shopping list, just as an indication of how many resources you might need. I can then convert this table using the multiplication numbers to produce a new table showing how many of the resources each power generation method needs to produce 10,000 watts. I've then ranked these and I'll add them to our main summary. The final table. This is it. We've done it. One table showing all the pros and cons of each of the power generation methods from Vanilla RimWorld and its DLCs. You'll end up using some of these methods loads and others never, and you'll no doubt end up with a total mix of power from multiple different sources. It's now over to you to make sure your colony has enough power for all the fabricating, machine exploiting, TV watching, sunlight farming, and biosculpting you can dream of. Thanks very much for watching.